How's everything on your end?
Good. I'm here in near Louisville, Kentucky, and we had record snowfall those last 36 hours. And I think I spent 4 hours shoveling the driveway yesterday and maybe an hour shoveling the deck, like just tons of snow. So when I get snow, I think of Costa Rica and think, wow, if I was there right now,
I
I
wouldn't have
wouldn't have
snow.
to shovel 1 ounce of snow. But today it's like tons. And, when you have a second story deck, you got to get that weight of all that snow off of there
Yeah.
so it doesn't compromise it.
Yeah, speaking of, I grew up originally in West Virginia, kind of close to you, about 4 hours from Louisville. You
Yeah,
said Lexington or Louisville?
Louisville.
Yeah, about 4 hours from you. And so I know all about the snow, but I haven't been there in many, many years. And I spend most of my time in either Miami or in Latin America. So I feel your pain and feel your love for Latin America.
Absolutely. Yeah, we just actually got back. We spent 2 weeks, and my wife and I said, let's go to areas of Costa Rica that we had never been to before. So we went to some pretty remote places, and the Orosi Valley was one, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, what was that? What was that about? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's over by Cartago, so maybe southeast of Cartago, and it's a real interesting spot. The Continental Divide goes up through a number of countries in South and Central and North America, all the way up. And the Continental Divide goes through Costa Rica. From your perspective, if you're west of the Continental Divide, then you get all the weather off of the Pacific. If you're east, then you get, all the weather off the Caribbean. And there's like a little dip in the Continental Divide where that's literally like a valley that opens it up. And that's where the Orosi Valley is. And what happens is because there's a dip in the Continental Divide, the weather patterns in the Orosi Valley come both ways. So they get more rain in the Orosi Valley more than anywhere else in Costa Rica. And it basically is a giant bowl that collects water like all year round. And 60% of Costa Rica's water comes from the Orosi Valley and goes to the rest of the country. So it's a real critical spot for the country. And it rains because there's that dip and they get both weather patterns. It basically rains there like all the time, but it's incredibly green and there are all kinds of huge numbers of birds and animals there. And if you can stomach the rain, and you're talking about like lots of rain, where sometimes the hiking trails turn into rivers. If you can stomach that, then you'll see some wildlife there that you won't see anywhere else.
So I know you've been traveling and invested down there in Costa Rica for a long time. What
Yeah.
inspired that? I mean, what took you there originally?
Well, first of all, I grew up in the States. I'm a husband, I'm a father. We actually have some little grandkids. They're beautiful. And our family has been to Costa Rica a number of times over the years. 25 years now, we've been going back and forth. Really, the very first time I went was 25 years ago with a group of guys to do whitewater rafting. But just a little bit before I get into that, there's so many great people in Costa Rica, and I run a Facebook group called Move to Costa Rica. It's non-monetized, and we give just free information about the benefits, the disadvantages. We keep it real. We're not realtors. We have nothing to sell. It's all free. And we have about 8,000 members, and we've been out there for about 8 years. And that's just something that I do just for fun. And I want to try to help people not fall for bad deals, especially if they're trying to buy property in Costa Rica. And that was really the thing that motivated me after going back and forth to Costa Rica, for, I guess, backing up almost 10 years ago, for 15 years, seeing a lot of people just not knowing what they're doing and getting taken, sometimes just because they didn't know what they were doing. That's why I started moving to Costa Rica. Dial the clock back all the way 25 years ago. I went first with a group of guys and we went river rafting. Like you may have done. I grew up around real estate here in the States. My dad was a builder. He had apartments. My mom was a real estate broker. My sister was an interior designer. And I thought, I'll probably get into real estate at some point, but I want to do my own thing and figure it out. So back in the late 90s, before that first visit to Costa Rica, I had dreams of building a cabin in the mountains, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and had bought an 8-acre parcel of land in a really cool new development called Leatherwood Mountains near Blowing Rock, if you know that area of the country. Just absolutely beautiful territory. I bought that property, and this was back in 97, where you could pay like $45,000 for 8 acres in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is what it cost. And I thought, okay, we're going to build a cabin. And so I started a cabin design folder, and 2 years went by, and we were having kids at the time, and I'd never been again. And I'm looking at that folder and I'm thinking, am I really going to ever build a cabin there? I mean, I can't even go visit. I'm so busy. And I thought, I probably won't, maybe someday, but nowhere near in the next 5, 10 years. So I called the salesperson and I said, Barbara, it's like, I think I might want to sell the lot. Do you think I can get my money back? This is when I didn't know anything. And she said, oh, honey, no problem. I'll double your money. Give me a week. So about a week later, she called back and said, got somebody who's going to buy your lot. You're going to double your money. And I thought, hey, I didn't expect that. I just thought maybe I'll get back what I paid for it, at that point. And so anyways, doubled the money. And I thought, I wonder if I could do this again. I bought a parcel of land, held it for probably a couple of years, doubled my money, and sort of kind of put it away in memory. And then all of a sudden, I'm in Costa Rica with a group of guys going rafting, never been there before. I knew it wasn't an island, so I was ahead of a lot of people, but that's all I knew. It was somewhere in Central America. And I remember Ollie North running guns to the Contras in Nicaragua through Costa Rica, but back in the 80s, that's all I knew. So here we were, a bunch of guys in a van going to the river rafting spot. And on the way, I'm looking out the window and I'm seeing all these different properties for sale. And back then, if you think about, like, now it's 2000, 2001, what were the big real estate franchises in the U.S. at that time? They were Remax, Century 21, ERA Realty. And there were signs down there for those franchises. And I'm thinking, what are U.S. franchises doing down in this backwater place? And sort of filed that away. We went river rafting and, what's going on here? And so I thought, okay, well, after the trip, I was curious about it and just started to dig around. If you think about the early 2000s, there was some information on the internet, but there wasn't much.
It was just getting up and going. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just getting up and going. And I picked up a Tico Times and a Howler magazine. Those are some of the English language publications that are still out there today, but that was really the only news about Costa Rica in English anywhere. And there were newspapers. They were laying everywhere. And so I picked one of each up and started thumbing through these publications when I got back and saw property for sale. And I got to find out what's going on. And so I found out that you could own title to property. You didn't have to be a citizen in Costa Rica. You could be a non-citizen, and you didn't have to have a Costa Rican citizen on the title like some other countries. You could own it outright without having a partner who was a Costa Rican citizen even. And then discovered that there were just a huge group of Americans and Canadians and Europeans that had found Costa Rica and were moving there, either in retirement mode or buying or starting a business, and some having decided to become realtors. And so I found out from just kind of poking around and talking to some of those early realtors down there, Americans and a couple of Canadians. You could own property the same way that Costa Rican could. There are titles to properties that could be held, and the government recorded the titles in a database like they were legit. And a realtor community existed, and some people spoke English there. And there were absolutely tons of properties available. Again, raw, unimproved land tracts like I had bought in North Carolina, but there was no MLS. There was nothing like a national listing database, and there was no type of mortgage money available. It was all cash at that point, similar to how it is today to some degree. I think we have some more options. But then, I got back and I'm thinking, man, the roads were just terrible. There was like potholes, and the government at that point was not managing the roads. So the Americans and the Canadians down there would all band together and go, okay, let's patch the road ourselves. And they were using gravel and this goopy stuff called sugarcane coating on the roads, if you remember that, to hold the dust down. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is so backwater. And the only thing that most people knew about Costa Rica back then was its involvement in the Iran-Contra scandal back in the 80s, where Ollie North was running guns, and they were flying the guns and the money, Ollie North was, into an airstrip that's just north of the Liberia airport today, where all these tourists come in now. And, they were running tons of money and taking money from Iran and buying guns. And that whole thing blew up, back in the 80s, and it was all over the news. And that's all I knew. But as I learned more about it, I'm thinking, okay, well, this has a lot of potential. There aren't a lot of people that are coming down here, but look at all this beautiful land and stuff by the beach that's cheaper, a lot cheaper than the States. And so then, I guess I also learned that Costa Rica didn't have that same unstable history as some of their neighbors. back then, like Nicaragua and El Salvador. It had been a stable country even up to that point. It had a democracy with fair elections and comparatively stable economy. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's interesting. So let me look for a piece of property and see. And so I started looking for, I always have a buy box. Whatever I do is before you start looking for a piece of property, whether it's a house or a piece of raw and improved land, what is it that you're looking for? And define it as much as you can. And so you've got your what you're looking for criteria. I call it a buy box. And as you see this plethora of all this real estate coming at you, you always go back to the buy box and go, is that anywhere close to what I'm really looking for? And that keeps you from getting diverted by just thousands of impressions, possibly even more now. So I was looking for, my buy box back then was raw and improved land, because I'd done one of those before, ocean view in a tourist vacation area, and land that I could hold for maybe 2 or 3 years, like I did before in the States, and flip it once that area had maybe gained some more traction. So I began to look at literally the Tico Times and the Howler. It's all I had for ads, looking for stuff and thinking, oh, well, there's a new development coming in near like Hermosa and Jaco called Rancho Monterey. And that was a big deal back then. And they had done some beautiful work. And I was looking at a 8-acre parcel, similar to what I had bought in the States, already subdivided into 12 lots with ocean view for like $220,000. And I'm thinking, that's just amazing, So I talked to my business partners at the time and my dad, like, hey, you guys, you want to go in on this with me? And it's all cash, though. There's no mortgage money. And everybody's like, I don't know about that. That's outside the country. I don't know. And so nobody would do it. And I'm thinking, well, all right, I'll just do it. So, but then I realized I needed, my own attorney, my own agent, but I didn't know who to pull in. So I kind of did this one on my own, not realizing that I didn't have a team around me, and I needed that team, but I did it on my own, taking a huge risk, and I didn't even know it. And that's sometimes when you see people now, going to Costa Rica, they think they can go and buy a property on their own, and it's the buying experience, and what I need to do and what I need to figure out is similar to back home, but it's not at all. And you have to have a team around you, that attorney that you can trust, that's your attorney, and that agent that's yours. You got to have them. At this point, I kind of knew it, but I didn't do it. So I bought this property for $220,000. And then 2 years later, I sold it for about $375,000. And I also overfinanced it. I underfinanced it for 3 years. So pretty much double what I paid over 3 years. What I also didn't know, and this was another bullet that I dodged, is that developers don't do business down there the way they do up here in the States, and probably Canada too, I'm guessing, is that if you're a developer here in the States, you go out and you get a construction loan, you work with a bank. There's like a program that the bank expects to be involved. That's where you get the financing. Here comes the money. You pay the bank loan off, or you switch it to a hold loan. But that's not how the developers work down there. They basically, a lot of them scrape together some money and they build something hoping they can get through it to start selling. But then some of them go belly up and the development turns into like a jungle, and it goes bankrupt and they don't invest any money in it and it goes belly up. And yeah, you bought a lot in there, but it's like a jungle. The jungle's taking it over now. And what I didn't know is what happened there. And about 3 or 4 years later, after I sold that property, guess what happened? Rancho Monterey developer went belly up. And that whole property, you can see it today. And it's like one of these Inca Mayan ruins, like all the vines are growing up over the buildings that were there. And I totally dodged a bullet there. And that's something else I didn't know, is that you have to do a lot of due diligence on the developer so that you're not stuck with a property or in a development that goes belly up. So anyways, that was a success despite running through the gauntlet. I didn't know I was running through a gauntlet. But then I went back to all my business partners and said, I found it. Remember this? 2 years ago, I bought it, made this much. And they're going, when are you going to do another one? And I'm thinking, where were you the first time? Yeah. But my dad still didn't want to do it. But my business partners were like, yeah, if you could find another deal like that, then let's all jump in. And so I engaged. It was a pretty good return on that first property, and had met an awesome realtor. God bless his soul. He's no longer around, but a retired guy back in the early 2000s named Jack Holloway. who was working out of Flamingo, and he was just fantastic. I mean, he honestly he had run a trucking company in Arkansas for like 20 years, but this guy should have been a realtor in the States. He was phenomenal. And I was telling him, okay, Jack, let's do another one. And Jack's like, well, you did your first one on that Central Pacific coast, but I'm doing a lot more business up near Flamingo, and I'd like to show you that area. And I'd only seen a little stretch of beach, probably from Jaco to Playa Esterios, and I think that's it. So when I got to Guanacaste and got to the Pacific, the northern Pacific around Flamingo and Potrero, I thought, okay, I like this even better. So then that became the focus area, and that buy box, that list of what are we looking for, really didn't change, but the location did, and it was a better area back then to think about buying property. Of course, now 20 years later, that Flamingo to Tamarindo corridor on the Pacific is the red hot zone for real estate and property. More beauty and a lot of things that central, in my opinion, that Central Pacific area just doesn't have. And sure enough, that's become a super popular area. And the first time I went through that Liberia airport, which I guess you've probably been through numerous times, it was a little single-story concrete block building it was outside, like it just had a covering. It wasn't fully enclosed. It didn't have any air conditioning. And they had these giant fans in the ceiling that kept the air moving, and a little bit past Ollie North's, airstrip, but it wasn't much more developed than that at the time. But now it's the hot spot, really, where everybody's moving to, that wants the beach lifestyle and more services. And now the roads are great. All the schools are there. So we first started looking, in that Central Pacific area, did that first deal. And then the rest of the time we've been focused on the Northern Pacific area. There's another rule of thumb that I use is if you're going to have multiple properties. So it could be, doesn't matter whether it's land or condos or homes or whatever it is, there are some efficiencies if you can group them all geographically close to one another, because if you make a visit, you can see all of them at once. You can keep better tabs. And if you have like a property management company or an attorney or wherever, all your holdings are centralized into one location. And that's been a good strategy for us, is not to be everywhere, to have a buy box and then to have a geographic focus. And that's helped a lot. So we started looking, with Jack Holloway's help around Flamingo and Potrero. I gave him the buy box and I said, Jack, go for it. It used to just be me, but there's a group of very successful guys. We're all involved in the same company, and we can do whatever size deal you can find, small, medium, large, go for it. And so the first deal that we did in the Pacific was not a piece of raw and improved land, because we wanted to have a base from which to work. So we actually bought a condominium in a condo development that was new at that time. So we're again talking 2000, 2001. It's still there today. Beautiful place, Villas Catalina near Playa Pinca. And we were one of the first ones that bought a unit in that development. That's another rule of thumb we use, is if it's a piece of hard real estate, meaning like a building, a structure, then try to get in on phase one so you have the most room for appreciation. So we bought a condo, I think second or third unit, and used that as our base for buying all the other properties. And Jack started to show us a lot of properties. And then from Jack, we met a great attorney that we took on our own, Ivan Granados. He's represented us for years, along with a couple others now. But we finally had a vetted team. We had a real estate agent that represented us. You can have a property that's selling, the seller has an agent, but you have to have your own agent down there or here, but down there especially, somebody to represent your interests, and don't ever use the same agent that the seller's using. Have your own. And then that second leg of the stool, that team member that you really need, is a trusted and vetted attorney. And down there, attorneys are kind of like here, an attorney plus a CPA.
Yep.
They help you think about legal stuff, but then they also do a lot of services that a CPA here in the States would do. And it's not just looking up the title to see if the title exists, trying to see, okay, does this guy that's trying to sell us the property, does he really own it or does he not? You have to check that out.
That's a problem all over Latin America from my experience.
Totally. Yeah, and not only do you have to look and see does the title have a lien, but you have to see does the property there are no property disclosures. So if I'm about to sell my house here in Kentucky, I have to fill out this 52-page disclosure form. There's nothing like that there, and you have to do your own due diligence with assistance from your team on the property because there are no disclosures, and the seller is not going to tell you what's wrong with the property. They're not going to tell you. You have to go and figure it out. Is there something wrong with that property or not? And that's another reason to not do it yourself. Find people, trusted vetted attorney, trusted vetted agent. It sounds so simple, but so many people go in by themselves and they don't know what they're doing. Just like me on my first deal, I dodged two bullets, two huge bullets. I didn't even know were there. I just got lucky. So anyways, we built a vetted team, that trusted attorney, that trusted agent, and then your own team that brings the money in, whether it's you or you plus other people. And we bought that property, we rented it out. And that was a great experience because we learned a lot of things about building a property there. Like we had to be, there were three of us that owned it. And we thought, man, these guys just, I mean, like, yeah, here's a blueprint, but they're not building to the blueprint. Like, okay, my blueprint says I have four, 2-foot tall columns in my main living room that go all the way to the ceiling. And those columns are Doric or Ionic or Corinthian style, and they're approximately 18 inches wide at the base and 12 inches wide at the top. The builders, at least back then, looked at this blueprint and thought, okay, well, I have some columns. I'm going to put some columns in. And you might get 3 or 4 as specified, but they were these columns were maybe 7 or 8 inches wide. And we showed up and said, got the columns in the right place, but they are not the right dimensions. And we had them tear them out and build them according to spec. So there's a lot of that there where you got to micromanage the heck out of, in my experience, the builder to get the right dimensions of things, like the beautiful ocean view villa, second story balcony had these amazing wrought iron fencing, all made on site, like beautiful. But if you looked at them from the side, they didn't match. Like this would go to the column, and this other one would join the column like over here. Like they weren't like in a line. And so we had to inspect the heck out of it. And we would come down there with these 50-yard tape measure, and we were measuring everything and like telling them where to put the switches and the outlets, because they would just throw a switch. They would throw a light switch in the living room they like a light switch in the living room would control the light in the kitchen or something crazy like that. So we had to get very specific and say, no, I want 3 light switches. I want them all to control the lights in this room, and I want them on this wall, this one over here. And so by the time we were done, we micromanaged the heck out of it. And we got the most beautiful unit in that entire complex. Even like there was a second floor unit, and the steps went up like this, and we helped them redesign the steps so you could actually get the appliances up the steps once the steps were built. And they weren't thinking about that. So anyways,
Yeah,
we
that's
micromanage that.
that's very common. I love Latin America, as many people know, but when it comes to hiring employees and all of Latin America, in my experience, that's what you have to do. You have to hold their hand all the way through the process. And in many things that I've done, I should have just done it myself. It would have been faster to do it myself than lose the time that I've lost having to micromanage. But can't exactly go
Yeah.
build a house by yourself if you don't know how to build a house.
Yeah. That's another piece is, man, if you're having somebody build you a place, live down there if you at all possibly can during that build cycle.
Yeah.
So you can get what you think you're going to get to make double, triple. Sure. Back then there were problems. You've probably seen this too, Matt, where they took great care with the custom door, like teak 3-inch custom door, beautiful, and the wrought iron chandeliers, all made on site, custom work. But then they would be installing the septic tank maybe on a house. And all of a sudden they didn't put maybe this house was on like a hill with these beautiful ocean views, and they were installing the septic tank. This is a friend of mine, underneath the house, kind of where nobody could see it when you're on the view deck. But then they didn't attach the septic tank to the house with strong enough attachments. And what happens? The people roll in about a month later, bam, they hear some crazy noise and they see their septic tank rolling down the hill toward the next house that's a little bit further, and they didn't use the right clipping to hold that tank next to the house tight enough. And, it's like, gosh, I didn't know I had to think about managing something like that. But yeah, you do.
Well, I think most of the time, in my experience, they know how to do the things right. They just choose not to, just to hurry up and get it done. That's been my experience.
Yeah. Yes, and we had a great builder, Daniel Cohen. I'm not sure if he's still building there with that Villas Catalina unit, and he was fantastic. He let us micromanage with him because we were giving him all these good ideas. I think he realized it, and he incorporated those good ideas into the rest of that development. But kind of back to this investment group, counting that first deal that I did, Rancho Monterey, and then the condo, everything else since then has been raw, unimproved land parcels in and around the Flamingo Potrero area. That's
How many
what we've
different
done.
purchases have you guys done down there?
We've bought, I actually had to make a list because I'm thinking, okay, I forgot about that one. I forgot about this one, but we've done, not including Rancho Monterey, which we've already talked about, and the Villas Catalina condo, we've done 8 more deals. And so you throw the others on there. That's 11 deals, and all have been sold except for 3. And we just listed the last 2. And I can give you a real kind of a bullet accounting of what we did and what kind of returns that we saw, if you want to talk about that.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
So again, this whole list of properties have been in this Flamingo Potrero area, and they were acquired anywhere between 2003 and 2015. This is the first block. And we had Jack Holloway, the agent, man, he was as busy as a one-armed paper hanger. We had him buying and selling all kinds of stuff. And God rest his soul, he was an amazing man. Our first purchase after the Villas Catalina condo was a half-acre beach lot on or near Flamingo that we bought for $550,000. And 4 months later, we sold it for $1.1 million. And we didn't plan that. We thought, okay, we'll buy it and hold it. We'll double our money. But somebody happened to come a lot sooner than 2 years and offered double for it. We did some things to that property where there was some on the plan. There was some manglares, if you know mangrove swamp areas that were identified as not buildable. And the plan was actually incorrect. There was about a quarter of the amount of mangrove swamp on that property than what was shown. So we had the plan corrected, and that made it more valuable. And maybe that's why somebody bought it so quick. I don't know. But that was another good one. We were always talking about trying to double our money on something. The second one was a beach lot in Potrero. It was 3.5 acres. So we bought it for $1.8 million, and we sold it 2 years later for 3.6. So that was we doubled our money on that one. And then I bought a Surfside lot, a little postage stamp lot in the Surfside neighborhood in Potrero for $35,000. Here's a great lesson. You think about stick with your buy box, have a trusted vetted team. Those are the things I've been talking about. But another thing is, with a raw and improved piece of land, there's a few check boxes that you need. And one is do your own survey, because the survey that you're looking at that was done a year ago or 10 years ago may not be accurate. And so when I bought that Surfside lot, I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got my own list of criteria I've got to follow. And one of those is a survey. And it's a postage stamp lot. It's like, this one's probably right. I didn't follow my own instructions. And so I bought this. I just thought this survey's got to be right. The realtor seems like they know what they're talking about. The survey wasn't right, and it was a real mess to get rid of it. I made some money on it, but the lesson is, always get a survey on every single piece of property from a trusted surveyor to double, triple check really where those boundaries are. And turns out this neighbor thought that the boundary was here, and the previous owner thought the boundary was over here. And there was a lot of confusion about where the boundaries were. But that was another parcel. And then we bought a 50-acre parcel. So they're going to start getting bigger in Flamingo with this amazing, we still own this one, with this amazing 180-degree water view on top of a mountain. And it looks right down where the new marina was going to be built. And back then, 20 years ago, everybody was talking about, oh, the new Flamingo Marina is going to be built. It's going to be beautiful. Of course, it took 20 years and 3 different tries for the government to actually make it happen. It's beautiful now. But even back then, 20 years ago, people were talking about, see that spot down there? See that sleepy little bay with the cows that are next to the horses. And that's where there's going to be a marina someday. So we thought, okay, well, if there's going to be a marina someday, we'll buy it
Give me
because
something.
yeah, you'll be able to see it. If you have a condo on this, let's say we build condo towers on the raw and improved land and the marina's there someday, maybe somebody might want to buy a condo and look down and see their boat.
Sure.
So we thought there was a little bit of sizzle potentially in this location. So we bought that 50-acre parcel, not knowing that we would need to hold it for 20 years until that marina got done. But we did. Hold times like that are not what we were after, but we've seen a massive increase. I mean, like a 7, 8, 9x, 10x increase in that property. It's just got listed. So it hadn't been sold yet. I don't know what we're going to get exactly. But that one was another good one, I'm sure, whatever we end up selling that one for. And then we found a 550-acre parcel and an 800-acre parcel. And the 800-acre parcel was, or is, we still own that one too, in Wacas. And 800 acres is like ginormous. And we actually thought it was 750 when we bought it, but there wasn't the drone-based, GPS-based survey ability to figure out how big the big property like that is. It was like, well, we think it's about 749 acres, and here are the boundaries. So we bought it thinking it was 749. After we did a drone-based, GPS-based survey, we found out it was 800, but at the time we thought it was 749. And that was an interesting one. It's one of we still own it. It's in Wacas, which is right between Flamingo and Tamarindo. And it's one of the last really large parcels, contiguous parcels in that area. And back in '02, our realtor friend, Jack, came and said, hey, he said, Robbie, he used to call me Robbie. He said, Robbie, I got one for you. You got to come down and see this. And I said, what do you have this time, Jack? And he said, oh, I got a big one. I have a big one. You have to come down and see it. And so I knew that Jack was on his game. And if he called me, I had to go see whatever he had. And on the way, I'm talking to him and I'm saying, well, tell me something. And he goes, well, these 2 brothers from Texas bought it back in the 80s. And they just want to double their money because their wives are beating them up to build them new houses. Okay. I didn't know how much it was. I didn't know how many acres it was. I just knew there were 2 brothers from Texas that wanted to double their money. And after buying the stuff in the 80s, this parcel. And then I said, Jack, well, how much do they want for it? And he said, hold on, $711,010. And I said, okay, well, we've bought properties for more than that and less than that before. Okay, check. We were checking stuff off. Can't wait to see it. And he said, I said, how big is it? I was expecting him to say 35 acres, 50 acres, 75 acres. He said, well, I think it's about 749 acres. And I said, wait a minute, Jack. You got 2 brothers from Texas who have 749 acres in Wacas between Flamingo and Tamarindo, and they want to sell it just for $711,000 and he said $711 and $10. And he said, all they want to do is double their money. Their wives want new houses. Come on down. I thought, okay, well, it sounds too good to be true. And then I said, okay, well, how are we going to see this property? Are you going to use your Discovery? He had one of those Discoveries with the snorkel that could go through water, 5 feet deep. Or what are we going to see it? No, there aren't any roads. You can't use a car. Well, how about an ATV? Nope, you can't use ATVs. How are we going to see there were no drones back then. And he said, we're going to ride horses. And I said, okay, we'll ride horses. And we got down there and got on horses and rode through this incredible, what we thought, 149-acre property with waterfalls and mountains and rivers and plains. And he said, don't go over there. There are pumas over there. Don't go over there. Big snakes. And I said, well, I'm following you. You take me where you want to on your horse. And we went through all these pine forests, not pine, but these forests that had these thorns that were like this big and had red ants all over the trees. And he goes, don't get near the trees. And so anyways, long story short, we bought that 800 acre parcel for $711,010, and we just listed it for about 12x there in Wacas. And then one thing I failed to mention, and then that's it. The that second beach lot that we bought for 1.8, it was 3.5 acres, and we bought it from a Costa Rican gentleman, and he said, if you pay me $1.8 million for this 3.5 acre beach lot, it's right on the beach. He said, I will throw in for free a 19-acre farm on the Monkey Trail.
Oof.
And back then we're like,
What's
what's the Monkey Trail? What the hell's the Monkey Trail? And we said, well, can you take us out there? And he goes, well, it depends on the weather, and it's been raining a lot and you really can't get out there. And we thought, well, I mean, we got to go see it. So he goes, okay. So this guy also had I think it was a Discovery or a Defender, whichever, that has the periscope thing, like the snorkel. And we literally got in this thing, and the Monkey Trail, if you know where that is, right? It goes from Potrero to Sardinal, and now it's a main cut through to get to the Liberia airport. Back then, it was like these giant, everything was mud. It wasn't even dirt. These huge ruts and water that was probably standing water in that trail that was probably 3, 4, 5 feet deep. And so we were going through the Monkey Trail on this Jeep, and he's like, roll the windows up. And we would go through this water ditch, and the water would come up midway, like on the windshield. Don't roll the windows down. Don't open the doors. And we thought, where in the world are we? And so we just said, okay, well, we're going to, we were thinking we're going to buy this anyway. Of course, we'll take his offer. So he gave us for free. Nothing's free, but that was the pitch. A 19-acre parcel on the Monkey Trail with that second 3.5 acre beach lot. And turns out that thing now is worth like $1.5 million, and we're about to list that too. So all these properties were run through that vetted, trusted team. So again, having that vetted, trusted realtor that works for you, having that vetted, trusted attorney that works for you and works with you to vet every single property. If you have a team that you can trust, you can find stuff even today. The deals are not over. It's just maybe the location of where the deals are that has changed a little bit. But as areas of Costa Rica come more online and become more and more popular, if you can find an area that is not yet like Flamingo or not yet like Tamarindo, then it's that early vision. It's that early time to get in where the properties are still reasonably priced, where there's some sort of a anchor there. Maybe it's a volcano, maybe it's a beach, but some place where people are going to come. Then that's what we looked at. And so if I think about what we have been able to do, we've invested. I'm trying to look at my notes here. I had to write it down. We've invested about over the years, about $7.2 million, and we've turned it into about $37 million of value. It goes across 1,500 acres.
And how many guys? Is this just a family thing? Just a group of family and friends?
It's how we do it is there's about the extended family, so to speak, is about 14 individuals, friends and families and coworkers, and every deal is different. So we'll put a deal out there to the entire group and say, does anybody want to do this one? And you might have just one that wants to do this deal. So you'll have a group of 2. Or we have the number of people on any one of these properties is anywhere from 1 to 13 people. And it's almost like a syndication where we'll put it under a Costa Rican corporation, the property. And then everybody, depending on it, let's say if it's $1 million property and you put in 100,000, then you own 10% of that deal. And it's super simple. It's, syndications here in the States are regulated and they're complex.
Huge pain in the end.
But they're a huge pain. This is you don't have the regulation down there around it, but the rules of thumb and the way that it's structured, you have a managing partner, which is usually myself or my business partner. And then you have quote unquote limited partners. That's everybody that throws the money in. We're always one of those. It's like an informal syndication. That's how we've been doing them.
Well, and are you guys still looking for, I assume you're still looking for deals down there and offloading your old stuff, still always kind of.
Yes, we're absolutely, we have, as I mentioned, there's out of that entire group of property, that first batch, There are three left, two of which we just listed. The other one we're going to still sit on for a while. But that's where we're going to. That's why we just went on this trip to some areas that are now considered remote, is we're trying to find that next area that isn't overrun with tourists like Tamarindo is now, or Flamingo, or in many cases, Dominical and Uvita are becoming a bit overrun. They've everybody's found them now.
What's that area of
Back
Costa
back
Rica
then.
that's kind of on the Nicaraguan border that has all the casinos that I hear that they're kind of developing that part of Nicaragua on the other side of it. It's super expensive, right down on the border of Nicaragua somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know much about that area. You're now the second person who's mentioned it, but I don't really know much about what's going on there.
Can't remember the name of it, but it's a really well developed part of Costa Rica that I have heard about a bunch of times. But I've heard that it's kind of a lot of people kind of think it might have hit its peak, and so they're now developing across the border on the Nicaraguan side of it.
Maybe it's like that Papagayo Peninsula where the Four Seasons is, and all those big hotels, and it's far north Costa Rica. Maybe it's you're talking about
Yeah,
right over
I'm
the
gonna
border
have
from
to.
that.
I'll look into that and send you a text on what that area is. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I do remember a guy telling me that that part of Costa Rica is kind of a no go for investors now because it's just like completely overrun. But if they're developing right on the other side of the border in Nicaragua, it might be worth a look.
Yeah, that's possible, and definitely Flamingo and Tamarindo are still, even those are hot spots, and you have families with kids moving in and international schools, and yeah, property is more expensive there compared to 15, 10 years ago. The occupancy that you can get is a lot higher, and the desire for those properties are a lot higher. Those are still great areas, but you have to find somebody to work with in those areas that are already hot to kind of pick through the stuff and cherry pick and find really, really good deals, because it's just harder to find good deals, but it doesn't mean that those areas are off the table.
Are you guys just going to stick with your core group of investors, or would you be open to new investors? Or bringing on new
You
investors
know,
could be a real pain in the ass if they don't.
yeah, we've really never thought about expanding the group. Our average return's been 188%, and the average hold time has been 16 months. And those are the realized gains. And then on these properties that are left, we think we're going to turn 4.5 million into about 26 million, and the returns are going to range anywhere from 460 to 1150%, about 550. Those are really good, and we want to keep doing those. But we've actually never thought about expanding the group much. Isn't I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Well, sometimes that can be it could be counterproductive depending on who you get as part of your group, right? I mean, if you already have something working, you would like to have some people that just are willing to send you the money and let you do the work, and then them just get checked. But unfortunately, when people, some people um, are want to be too hands on, and they're not worth having. To be kind of careful about that.
Yeah,
But
I think for folks out there who want to do some things like we have, there are back to those core principles. You can do it yourself, but you got to follow certain principles. You got to have that buy box. You have to find your reason. You got to figure out what is it that you want to buy. Is it a raw land? Is it rental property? Is it commercial office space? Is it second home stuff? Like, what is the niche that you want to operate in? It's so easy to see all these listings of all these things, and all of a sudden you're just running around seeing properties and you have no focus. So I'd say find your focus. And then secondly, figure out your funding. Put that group together yourself, and friends and family are the best way to start. That sounds kind of daunting to some people, but everybody is looking for where to put their money. And that includes your friends, it includes your family. And if you think you have a good deal, share it, because a lot of other people might think, you know what, that sounds like a pretty good deal that my friend or coworker or cousin found. And then back to the basics. Pick an area, build that team, and then run your numbers. I can't tell you how many parcels of land we have looked at, or raw or structures, whether it's a rental unit or whatever the case is, where we run the numbers first. And if the numbers don't make sense, we won't even go see it. Like a great example, we were looking at a short-term rental property in Samara, near Samara, and beautiful, cute little like 3-unit property. It had all the rental history. It had everything. But then again, there's that disclosure stuff. And is the rental history that you're looking at from the owner really the rental history? Is it real or is it not? So we thought, okay, let's vet these numbers. So we thought, okay, let's call a couple of property managers and see what the fees are. Let's figure out the other units around this one. What kind of occupancy rates are they really seeing? After we gathered our own data, we looked at this rental history and thought, this is totally bogus. There's no way that this 3-unit property can produce anywhere close to what the seller is saying that it will. And so we passed on that one. And that's another thing is you can't just take, maybe in the States you can, but down there you can't. You have to do your own research and vet your own stuff and see it.
I know you've mentioned many times about having your own team, and in my experience in Latin America, you're 1,000% right. Would you be willing to share who you use and who you trust in terms of legal stuff down there?
Yeah, and I think for those who want to contact me, sure. I mean, we've got some good folks, and we have more than one, so it kind of depends on what type of deal it is. We'll pull in one of a few different legal resources, and also the agents. We bought all these properties through one agent, but we're selling them through another. And one of the reasons is the agent is no longer around. But the big properties that I mentioned are development parcels. And back 10 years ago, the realtors in this Flamingo Tamarindo area, they were all residential realtors. They were agents that were selling homes and condominiums and maybe build lots to buyers, to consumers. And these folks didn't know and don't know, in my opinion, how to move large development parcels. Who's buying those? It's not the same people. They're builders, developers, a lot of local builders and developers, and some, maybe a builder or a developer from Chile or Argentina. It's a different market. So we've listed some of the larger parcels with Costa Rica now has commercial real estate firms. They didn't 10 years ago. So we'll pull in partners depending on the situation, but always we'll have a legal part of the team and then a realtor that's representing our interests.
Now, in my experience in Latin America, it's almost impossible to sit in the U.S. and just Google all of these things that you're trying to find, especially in Latin America, because they don't update the websites. The real estate websites in most countries I've been to, 80% of what you see on them have already been sold or just don't exist, something.
Yes.
But are there any, I do know that Costa Rica is a lot more Americanized than many other Latin American countries. Are there any websites or groups or anything? I know you have your Facebook group that you would recommend for people to get involved with to start learning about this stuff if they're interested.
It's an evolving thing. Historically, there has been no, we as Americans and probably Canadians too. I'm not sure about Canada. I'm guessing so. There's the multiple listing service. You can go.
You don't have that.
You can have your agent go on your behalf and look at stuff for sale and send to you automated emails of stuff that fits your criteria. There is no MLS, like you said, anywhere in Latin America, and certainly not Costa Rica. Although there is a group of realtors, a real estate association, who has started one, but the use is not there yet. The website's there, but there isn't a lot of stuff yet. And really, you have to pick your area and find somebody who knows how to figure out what's for sale. And let's say let's pick an example again, because I've been using it of Flamingo. There might be 10 major real estate offices in and around Flamingo. Virtually nobody's using that MLS that was just put up. It's still in its infancy, so it basically doesn't exist. And every real estate office has its own little group of listings that they'll put on their website. But then again, like you say, 80% of what's on their website has already been sold. Yep. And they might even have something on their website that it's not even their listing. It's some other guy's listing, but they realize if I put this listing on my website, I get traffic because the house is beautiful and people call me about it. And so even some of the stuff that's up on these realtor websites isn't even their own listing. But then if you can find somebody who knows the area and who can be some early vetting boots on the ground for you to kind of create a short list for you, like I was doing with Jack and still do today with some agents down there, then that's really the best way. And they know all the other agents. They know what they have for sale. They know what the other agents have for sale. It's like a little bit of a networking thing, and that's how it happens. So if you can find an agent to in the area that you're interested in, give them your buy box and go dig stuff up for me. That's the best kind of agent that you can find.
Yeah, Latin America, for the most part, in the real estate world, just is kind of the Wild West. There's no licensing. You don't have to have a license to be a real estate agent. It's just everyone from the taxi driver to the cleaning lady is all of a sudden a real estate agent if you tell them you're looking for real estate, right? Especially if you're a gringo just landing down there and you're like, I want to buy a house in Costa Rica. Everyone's all of a sudden a realtor. And, I think if you don't know that you can get scammed very, very easily with that kind of a setup, like you kind of said earlier. So let me ask, if someone wants to learn more or reach out to you, how do they do that?
Yeah, well, you can probably post my email. I help people every day through the Move to Costa Rica side. I just try to tell them what I know and
Move to
try
Costa
to,
Rica on Facebook is the group name.
yeah, move to Costa Rica is the Facebook group, and or you can feel free to post my email.
Okay.
And yeah, I try to help people out. I dodged some bullets early on because I just didn't know what I was doing. I could have gotten clobbered. And I see people getting clobbered every day. And a lot of people who, let's say they buy into a development and then it goes belly up and they didn't know it and they feel bad about it. And they feel there's some maybe element of anger or shame. And so they're not necessarily raising their hands and going, man, I made this huge mistake and I didn't know about it. But if you dig through a little bit, you realize that folks will then say, well, here's what I bought and I know I'm in trouble. What do I do? Or I'm looking at this property. I think it's just amazing. And right away, I'll give them 3 reasons to not touch it. So there are things that, like this whole concession property thing, staying away for that. Well, people don't know to stay away from concession property. They don't even know what that is. And so you have a lot of folks coming down with 250,000, $500,000, maybe $1 million in cash, going down and making a lot of mistakes just because they don't know what they're doing. This Move to Costa Rica Facebook group, it's all about trying to keep it real and to keep people from making mistakes. And if maybe I can help a few people avoid some bullets like I did early on, then I'm going to feel good about it.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, I sincerely appreciate your advice, information. It's we can help people. That's the idea behind this platform. So we both have our head in the same place, if you will.
That's great, man. I really appreciate it. I've never done anything like this, but happy to help anybody who wants to buy property in Costa Rica. It's a great place to buy. You just have to know what you're doing.
Yep. Thanks, Rob. Have a great day. Sincerely appreciate it.
You too, Matt. Have a great